I know you heard me on the radio. Flexing, she loved the sound of my voice, it's the best thing. Daydreaming of the jazz all day. Pick up the phone late night with Larry K. I know you heard me on the radio. Flexing, she loved the sound of my voice, it's the best thing. Daydreaming of the jazz all day. Pick up the phone late night with Larry K.
Fury fam, Larry K here with you, and I know I did a post-game reaction, actually not a reaction, did a post-game show live, but I still wanted to hop on and do a pre-recorded video just to touch on some points and some highlights as to kind of what I see as the state of the Dolphins following yet another loss, this time to the New England Patriots up in Foxborough, Massachusetts. To be quite frank, I did not expect the Miami Dolphins to win. Anybody who watches my show, LG Shaking the Panel, knows that I predicted a loss. I just think that as hopeless and as much as this franchise and team feels like a rudderless ship to the fans right now, players are human, and unless you have really good leadership at the head coaching position and elsewhere, and you have some hope and something to hang your hat on, when you start to lose confidence this late in the year and just nothing seems to be going your way, I just feel like players are human beings, and they're going to be susceptible to some of that as well. So, first of all, and this kind of touches on the first narrative, if I have to hear one more time on any Dolphin show or from any fan or anybody else, this, people do it so subtly and they think they're being slick. Like, Big O will keep saying, oh, this guy can't win without Tua. McDaniel hasn't won without Tua. Yeah, while true, he also has lost plenty with Tua as well. These subtle, Tua's out. I don't see how we're going to win. Oh, there's a big drop-off. Teddy wasn't good. Skylar wasn't. It's all this subtle nonsense to try to, subliminally push the point that Tua being injured is the crisis of the season, and that Tua being injured, again, is the reason for his sloppy play in Green Bay, and Tua being injured is the big consideration. But when he's healthy, he balls out. If I have to hear that BS narrative one more time, I might scream. I might scream right here on the show. I don't know. I might break this microphone, which I don't want to do because I need it to talk to you guys and do other things. But enough of that. Tua was struggling down the stretch in every single game he played in December. He looked terrible since we went on the road. And quite frankly, he was terrible in the second half against the Texans. Couldn't handle the pressure. Wasn't very good against Pittsburgh either. So he had, and I admit it, he had good games, and he did have good games, and he balled out in the middle of the year. And he balled out earlier in the year against Baltimore, and I think he had a good game against Buffalo the first time, and not so bad the second game. Not so bad the second Buffalo game. But the narrative, the narrative has shifted so much now that all anybody wants to talk about is Tua's injury. Our problem started before Tua's injury. Our problem started with Tua on the field, okay? So this isn't just about Tua and his concussion. This is about Tua not being able to get it done in the clutch because he hasn't gotten it done in the clutch for 3 years straight now. This is about Tua having severe limitations that when defenses adjusted to what was working, he had no answers. And this is about Mike McDaniel being brought in specifically to cater to and support Tua and to get Tua over the hump, which he was able to do by designing an offense with very elite wide receivers that relied on pre-snap reads and quickly throwing the ball to a spot on the field. Once defenses took that away, and Tua was going to be forced to read defenses post-snap and to not throw to a spot but find the open man and place the ball in the right position, then he struggled immensely. And the reason I bring this up is because the team is struggling now. This is an epic collapse. This is a meltdown of nearly, unprecedented, it's ridiculous. And sometimes I try to be eloquent. I can't do it off the cuff, so I apologize. But this was just an epic meltdown. And it started before Tua got hurt. So McDaniel deserves blame. Tua deserves blame. And the reason I bring that up is because we cannot go into this offseason and pretend like McDaniel Tua is the solution. And all we got to do is patch up the defense a little bit and get Tua healthy, make sure he's healthy, get a good backup because no. The problem started before the injury, and the problems are deep on this team. The fact is, when this team fired Flores, and I'm going back to when this team fired Brian Flores, they made a choice between Flores and Tua. And when they hired a coach, one of the conditions for the coaches that they were interviewing was they had to be willing to go all in on Tua. They had to believe in Tua. And then they had to participate in the propaganda to sell the idea that he was going to be great to the fan base. McDaniel did good enough to have Tua balling out for some time with a specific system that catered to his specific skill set and covered up his limitations. But when that particular system was no longer viable, the Dolphins and Tua struggled. And now what you're seeing is, at the end of the season, with everything on the line, backup quarterbacks, Tua, it doesn't matter. Mike McDaniel is losing the team. He's not. You have guys in Waddle and Hill, which, by the way, today, Teddy Bridgewater threw the very costly pick six. That was terrible. The pick six was terrible. But earlier in the game, when we were moving the ball, when we scored, Teddy Bridgewater was doing something that Tua never does. He was taking the ball, taking the snap, staying in the pocket, hanging in the pocket, keeping his eyes all over the field, reading the defense post-snap, and delivering the ball to whoever was open. And a couple times, that resulted in checkdowns, which resulted in significant yardage attained by the receiver or the running back or whoever it was. Then he threw the pick six. It was costly. No one's saying Teddy's the answer. So, but the idea that Teddy was just catastrophically bad and, had we had a better quarterback, we would have won, I don't think is necessarily accurate. Teddy Bridgewater, final stats of the day, 12 of 19 for 161 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, and really probably should have had 2 touchdowns because the other one was a backward pass to Tyreek Hill. So, not a great day. You don't expect a great day from Teddy. I didn't expect anything special from Teddy, but not a catastrophic day, aside from that interception, which was pretty big. But, it's not like we couldn't have overcame that if he didn't get injured or Skyler came in and did something. Skyler Thompson, 12 of 21 for 104 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. It was thrown, wasn't the best throw. And Hill actually, it was behind Hill, so Hill wound up hitting it up in the air as an interception. And that was right after Hill had the really costly penalty for the illegal shift where he kind of was lazy getting set up. And Skyler ran for a first down, which was negated by that penalty. Now, for all the Skyler Thompson guys out there, all the Skyler guys out there who said, look, this is a great opportunity because the future's already on the team. Skyler Thompson is it. Skyler Thompson's going to be the future, the franchise future QB. Skyler Thompson's going to take the reins, lead us to the playoffs, and prove himself. You got to pump your brakes. And that's not because I'm hating on Skyler Thompson at all. I'm not hating on Skyler Thompson. I think Skyler Thompson has a great future in this league. I think he's shown flashes. I think we can all be excited about him. I think, though, to get from third-string late draft pick to backup quarterback is quite a leap, and he did do that this year. There was a time he was second string. He came in today and played okay. He didn't play bad. He again showed some flashes, again showed some limitations, didn't jump off the film and be like, whoa, this guy's great. But to go from backup from third string to backup is a leap. Then to go from backup to starter is another considerable leap. And then yet to go from starter to an elite franchise quarterback is an even bigger, exponentially bigger final leap. So that's not saying Skyler can never get there. That's not saying I don't like his game. That's not saying I'm not excited about the kid. That's just saying, though, that the idea and the hope that Skyler was already the franchise quarterback on this roster is really premature. Skyler's not going to save this thing. And the reason I bring up, there's a method to my madness, Fury fam. The reason I bring up Skyler and I bring up Tua's injury and things is because of this reason. We are going to need to try to find a formidable, capable quarterback who has shown that he can win games as a starter in this league, and we are going to have to try to bring that person in for next year. You cannot hide behind this injury BS and pretend that the only issue with Tua is being injury prone, which is a legitimate issue, by the way. But it's coupled with the other issue, which are his limitations when playing healthy and his limitations and struggles late in the season when we need him most. And the injury concerns, those are both big enough concerns that you need to start thinking about pivoting away from Tua. Period. But, the injuries and the play on the field should be considered, not just the injuries. And two, the idea that we have Skyler and he's just going to take the reins is not going to cut it either. You need a guy who's been a starter in this league who's proven he could win. And it's not going to be a superstar unless Tom Brady really decides to come over here for his last twilight year. I don't know if that's even the best decision for the Dolphins or Brady, quite frankly. But unless he's coming, it's going to be tough. Unless Lamar Jackson really gets out of Baltimore and comes over here, it's going to be tough. We're looking at the Jimmy G's, the Minshews, the Cars of the world. And you know what? It's not ideal, but we don't have a choice. We're not going to be able to just pick up a franchise QB in this year's draft or a franchise QB in free agency who's young, in their prime, and promising. It's going to have to be one of those guys who aren't that terrible of options. And if you want to bring Tua back, that's fine, but it better be a legitimate competition. And I'm not sure Tua beats any of those guys out. Maybe Carr. But then if he gets hurt and one of these guys takes the reins and they show they could win down the stretch, then maybe that's who you ride. Fact is, we have a window right now where we have good players on offense, really talented players on offense, really talented, where the defense is going to get healthier because guys are going to come back from injury and they're not going to be nearly as bad as they were this year, and where you could plug a couple holes on defense with a couple free agent acquisitions and some, draft picks in the third, fourth, second round, where we can be a formidable team that contends. But if we're going to be a formidable team that contends, we need to do something at the quarterback position. But this isn't all about the quarterback position, because today's loss was a team loss. And I think it's because the team is reeling. The team is falling down. The team is rudderless. They don't have brakes, and they don't know how to stop the bleeding. And that falls a lot on Mike McDaniel. And let's talk about Mike McDaniel. We have one game left in the season. I know some people are still excited that we still have a chance at the playoffs. To me, we don't deserve the playoffs at this point. Even if we backed into the playoffs, look, I'll be here. I'll talk about it. I'll be excited about our matchup. It's one extra week of Dolphins football. But it doesn't change any of the existential dread we have going forward about the team. So Mike McDaniel was brought in here to do two things primarily. Number one, he was brought in here to maximize and get the most out of Tua and to make Tua a success. The second thing he was brought in here to do was build upon and do better than Brian Flores had done. Brian Flores had 2 straight winning seasons at 9-8, but in both of those seasons he had struggled at some point, especially last season where Brian Flores started out on a 7-game losing streak that made it virtually impossible to make the playoffs at the end of the year, despite the fact that he won a ton of games down the stretch and still wound up with a winning record. But we were a 9-8 team under Brian Flores, a winning team who just happened to miss the playoffs. We didn't have Tyreek Hill. We didn't have Teron Armstead. Okay? We didn't have Mostert. We didn't have Wilson. We didn't have a lot of these weapons. Didn't have Sherfield. Didn't have Wilson. Cedric Wilson. So when McDaniel took the reins with all these added weapons, and he was supposed to be an offensive guru and a likable guy, everybody made so much about Brian Flores is a terrible attitude. He's not a likable guy, But McDaniel is such a likable guy. The press loves him. The players love him. He's so fun, blah, blah, blah. With his coaching philosophy and the added weapons and the improvement at the quarterback position, Mike McDaniel was supposed to do better than Brian Flores had. So on that aspect, he has failed. Because the best he can do is exactly the same record as as Brian Flores, and he still might not make the playoffs. And there's a very real possibility and a very real chance, and I'm predicting a loss next week. There's a very real chance that he finishes worse than Brian Flores. That is an abject failure. The second thing was improving Tua. Did he improve Tua? Well, here's the thing. I think he did his best coming up with one type of system, one method, one strategy that maximized Tua's play. And it worked for, I'd say, if you're being fair, if you give him the Baltimore game, you give him the first Buffalo game, You give him 4 of the wins on the 5-game winning streak, because I won't give him Pittsburgh. Tua was not very good at Pittsburgh. And even if you give him the second Buffalo game, that's 7 games that Tua played pretty well. The first Pats game, he did not play well. The 3 games down the stretch in the road trip, he did not play well. Pittsburgh, he did not play well. That's 5 right there where he did not play well. And then he's not available a bunch of other games. And it's debatable how well he played in the 2 Buffalo games, but I'll give it to him. My point in saying that is McDaniel, for less than half the games of the season, for about half, a little less than half, a little more than half of the games Tua actually played, a little more than half. Many of them against not good teams, but I said it doesn't matter in the NFL, and I'll stick to it. But just about half good and half bad when Tua actually played. Got him a lot of stats, got him a lot of accolades middle of the season, but he did not get Tua to perform down the stretch. Did not get Tua to play better in cold weather. Did not help Tua succeed to the extent that we were all confident on the road trips that he could go toe-to-toe with superstar quarterbacks. He was outplayed by Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant, in San Francisco. Just outplayed. Severely outplayed by him. So he failed to make Tua a success on the aggregate. Did he help Tua a bit in the middle? Did he maximize to the best of his ability Tua? Yes. Did he make Tua a success overall this season? No. So he failed. Failed on improving the team from Flores and failed on maximizing and helping Tua to be a success. And I said at the beginning of the year, right? We could all have our opinions about McDaniel. We could all have our opinions about Tua. And they will fluctuate and change as the season results come in. But that the season should be taken as a whole. Success or failure. And if you're looking at this season as a whole right now, the fact that we had some success in November is really pretty irrelevant right now. The season as a whole has been a failure. Tua has not stayed healthy. He has not played consistently well. He did not play well down the stretch. McDaniel did not get the most out of his team during times of adversity. When the quarterback was out, we couldn't pull off wins even though we were in the games. The team hasn't performed up to par in situations where we needed them to. He's had questionable calls in the red zone. He's had questionable game management, questionable clock management, questionable with not challenging things that should have been challenged and challenging things that shouldn't have been challenged and losing timeouts. Why do I bring this all up? Because we can't go into next season with the McDaniel Tua regime and pretend all is good. If you want to keep McDaniel, you got to at least think about the pros and cons, what he's done well, what he hasn't done well, and why it is you think he's a good option to continue to stay with. If you're going to stay with Tua, you need to bring in legitimate competition. That's just flat out. But to me, McDaniel was brought in for one last chance at making Tua a success, which would make this particular regime and this particular rebuilding job a success, and he failed, which means that Grier and Ross failed with hiring him and thinking that that would get us over the hump. It has not worked. Grier and Ross also not only decided that they had to keep the quarterback, whoever the coach was going to be, but Grier and Ross also decided that Boyer needed to stay and the defensive staff needed to stay intact, and that was a condition of employment for Mike McDaniel and for whoever our coach was going to be. The conditions of keeping Tua and keeping Josh Boyer limited for sure our pool of head coaching candidates. If they didn't handcuff candidates to those two guys and they said, we'll hire the best man for the job and you make the decisions, we probably would have had a bigger pool to hire from. So their gamble on keeping Josh Boyer and keeping Tua has failed because I know there's a ton of injuries on defense, and I'm not putting it all on the defense. I don't expect the defense to be stellar. And quite frankly, the defense has probably outperformed what it should do in a couple games down the stretch, given how many injuries they'd had. But that still doesn't excuse a lot of the bad play calls that Boyer has made here, including the touchdown against New England, where Duke Riley is sprinting out to a wide receiver because there's no corner on him. And by the way, Patriots had lined up like that earlier, and it was the same problem, and the Dolphins didn't adjust. That's on Boyer. Boyer has got to go too. But that's on the Grier and Ross for keeping him. And speaking of McDaniel and some of his issues, receiving, Tyreek Hill, 4 receptions for 55 yards. Jalen Waddle, 3 receptions for 52 yards. I understand teams are playing these guys, and they're doubling them. They're coming up with bump and run schemes, other things to stop them. But they are still 2 of the most talented wide receivers in the entire league. And the last couple games, they're just not getting open. At what point does a good offensive coordinator or a good head coach that's supposed to be an offensive guru, at what point does that guy find a way to scheme those guys open better? Or at what point does that guy find a way to use the fact that the defense is giving them all the attention and get guys like Cedric Wilson, Trent Sherfield, Mostert out in the flat, or Mike Gesicki open for more production consistently? At what point does that fall on the coach when these guys are not open and the scheme is failing to get other guys open at a consistent clip and for consistent gains? That's another indictment on Mike McDaniel. And so I know that this video seems like just I started it and I just went on a rant, essentially ripping the organization and calling for changes as far as Tua and McDaniel, but that's just where we are right now. The Patriots, by the way, are not a very good team. I'm not taking anything away from the Patriots, but their offense has been terrible all year. Mac Jones has not been good. He had a decent game, and I'm not taking anything away from the Pats. They played well enough to win on defense and offense down the stretch. But Mac Jones was not lighting the world on fire. He did just enough to win. We were just absolutely rudderless on offense, and it didn't matter if it was Skyler or if it was Teddy. And that goes on the head coach and the offensive staff. And if the team is collapsing to this extent and they can't pull a win out to save their life, even in desperation, even for pride in themselves, that they don't want to go out like this against a division rival that's not very good, then I got to put a lot of that on the head coach. If we miss the playoffs, you can't just assume Mike McDaniel and Tua are back and we're just trotting it out. If you do that, you're telling the fans, F you, we don't care about you, and we also think you're stupid. We think you're stupid. We think you're gullible. We think you'll fall for this shtick again. That's unacceptable if they do that. Unacceptable. This season is unacceptable. Sticking with Boyer and Tua and hiring McDaniel and teasing us with the propaganda and some paper nonsense wins in the middle of the season that mean nothing at the end of the day is unacceptable. This organization is failing time and time again. And it's got to stop. You got to do something. Got to try something. You can't just trot this out here again. You can't trot it out here. It cannot happen. So I'm sorry if I spent a little time. I'm sorry, this was actually the rant when it was supposed to be a more, nuanced, calm video. It was more of a rant. But I've had it. I've had it. I've had it with this franchise, man. And the way they handle things and the way us fans have to suffer through it. I've absolutely had it. I've just had it. But look, guys, I just wanted to, just discuss those things. I mean, these are the biggest glaring issues with me right now, and the false narratives and the subtle messaging campaigns from some in the media, some in Dolphins media, and the content creator community we can't stand for it. You get in these people's channels, you go, into your message boards and your fan pages, and you spread the word. We're not falling for that narrative about the injury and this and that. No. We are smart enough to see it for what it is. You guys failed well before the injuries. You failed on more than one level, and we demand some kind of changes. You want to keep McDaniel, fine. You better get a new D coordinator. You better bring in competition for Tua. You want a clean house, Ross? You want to fire Grier and everybody, the whole regime, and bring a visionary in with these tools that he has to bring in his coach who brings in his quarterback? I'm down with that too. I don't think anybody is unexpendable at this point. Nobody is unexpendable. Nobody. Everybody's expendable right now. You have that much talent. You start out with that record, and you have an epic collapse. Everybody's on the chopping block. I wish Ross was on the chopping block. Unfortunately, he's not. Because, I think it all starts from the top. And he's been a failure. And the way they went about this regime change was a failure. By the way, smearing Flores' name because they didn't want it to be, oh, we got rid of Flores because he wanted Watson. We decided against Watson. We didn't want Flores because it was either Flores or Tua, and Tua's people didn't want him anymore. They didn't want that to be the story because if that was the story and Tua failed, they would look stupid. So they had to come up with this whole thing that Flores is not collaborative, he's a terrible person, he's hard to work with, all this stuff. Well, by doing that, they provoked Flores to file his lawsuit and make all his allegations and to fire back, which caused us to lose our first-round pick and any position we might have had or hoped to have to get a quarterback next year if we needed, or any other valuable player we might need. And it scared away other viable candidates from coming here because of all the turmoil the organization was in. So the way, just every aspect of how Stephen Ross handles this organization causes problems. All of it relates to our failures on the field and beyond. And I've absolutely had it. So if this guy tries to sell us some bill of goods next year by trotting out the same crap, saying it's just about the concussion or whatever else, I'm going to sit here every time I'm on this channel, and Fury Fam is going to be at it too, and we are going to be relentless, and we are not going to let them get away with those fake narratives. We are going to hold them accountable with our wallets and with our voices. Guys, if you have not subscribed yet to this channel, smash the subscribe button. Join Fury Fam. We've gotten a lot of new subscribers in the last couple of weeks. Every one of them has been contributing awesomely. Smash subscribe. Smash the like button. I'll remind you to check out on Facebook the Dolphin Den. It's the official group of this podcast, of this channel. Check out the Dolphin Den. My live show is simulcast on that, in that group, and we have great discussions there. Shout out to Tori Day on that. Donations always appreciated. They've been coming in a little bit, and they help the channel, help fully pay off the streaming service annually, which is a big help. And they do other things that help us reinvest. So all of that is also much appreciated. If you haven't checked it out yet, or even if you have, don't forget, Wednesday at 7 p.m., we have LG Shaking the Panel. That's our live show. You can come up on the panel and talk to us. You know, give us your thoughts. We'll give you the floor. You can talk, debate, argue, whatever else. Make sure you tune into LG Shaking the Panel this Wednesday at 7. And I hope you enjoy the next couple days, and I hope you find some peace in something other than football until I talk to you again. Fins up, Larry K out.
I know you heard me on the radio flexing. She loved the sound of my voice, it's the best thing. Daydreaming of the jazz all day.